In a moment of courage and vulnerability, Ada finally confessed the truth to Chinedu, that he was not her cousin, but her son, the product of her past relationship with Pastor Obinna. She laid bare her soul, her words filled with regret and sorrow as she revealed the painful truth of his origins. Chinedu listened in stunned silence, his heart heavy with the weight of his mother's confession. He struggled to comprehend the enormity of what he had just learned, the revelation shaking him to his core. But even as he grappled with the truth of his identity, Chinedu knew that one thing remained unchanged: the love and bond he shared with Ada. She was still his mother, the one person who had always been there for him, no matter what. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the truth that Ada had tried so desperately to bury began to resurface, like a dark shadow looming over her once peaceful life. She knew that she couldn't keep the secret forever, that eventually, the truth would come to light, and she would have to face the consequences of her actions. And so it was that one fateful day, during a church service filled with the solemnity of worship and praise, one of the church ladies approached Ada with a determined expression on her face. She had heard the rumors swirling around Ada and Pastor Obinna, and she was determined to get to the bottom of the scandal that had rocked their tight-knit community to its core. With all eyes turned towards them, the church lady confronted Ada in front of the entire congregation, her voice ringing out like a clarion call of judgment and condemnation. She accused Ada of having an affair with Pastor Obinna, of betraying the trust of her husband and the sanctity of their marriage vows. The church was in shock, the air heavy with disbelief and disbelief as the accusations hung like a dark cloud over their heads. Ada stood frozen in place, her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to find the words to defend herself against the onslaught of accusations and condemnation. As the truth of Ada's betrayal began to sink in, Jide felt as if the ground had been ripped out from beneath him, leaving him adrift in a sea of uncertainty and despair. He couldn't believe that his wife, the woman he had loved and trusted with all his heart, had betrayed him in such a profound way. His heart shattered into a million pieces as he watched Ada's tear-streaked face, her eyes filled with guilt and remorse as she struggled to come to terms with the consequences of her actions. He wanted to believe that it was all just a bad dream, that he would wake up any moment to find Ada by his side, her arms wrapped around him in a comforting embrace. But deep down, he knew that the truth couldn't be denied. Ada had betrayed him, had broken the sacred trust that had once bound them together as husband and wife. And now, he was faced with the impossible task of rebuilding his shattered life without her by his side. As the chaos and confusion of the church service began to subside, the truth that Ada had tried so desperately to hide finally came to light. It was revealed that Chinedu, the 7-year-old boy who had been living with Ada and Jide, was actually Pastor Obinna's son, the product of their secret affair from years ago. Jide's world crumbled around him as he grappled with the devastating revelation. He couldn't believe that Ada had kept such a monumental secret from him for so long, that she had betrayed him in such a profound way. He felt as if his entire life had been a lie, as if everything he had ever believed in had been torn away from him in an instant. Unable to bear the weight of his grief and despair, Jide made the difficult decision to leave Ada, to walk away from the woman he had once loved more than life itself. He couldn't forgive her for what she had done, couldn't bring himself to trust her again after she had shattered his heart into a million irreparable pieces. And so, with a heavy heart and tears streaming down his face, Jide turned his back on Ada and walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. He didn't know what the future held in store for him, but one thing was certain: he could never go back to the life he had once known, the life he had once shared with Ada before it all came crashing down around them. As Jide walked away from Ada and the shattered remains of their marriage, he felt a sense of emptiness and loss wash over him like a tidal wave of despair. He didn't know where he was going or what he would do next, but one thing was certain: he couldn't stay in Eco, surrounded by the painful reminders of the life he had lost. Meanwhile, Ada was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, grappling with the guilt and remorse that threatened to consume her from within. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had betrayed the trust of the man she loved more than life itself. But now, she had to find a way to move forward, to rebuild her life from the ashes of her shattered dreams. In the end, Ada found solace in the love and support of her family and friends, who rallied around her in her time of need. She knew that she had a long and difficult road ahead of her, filled with challenges and obstacles that would test her strength and resilience to the limit. But she also knew that she wasn't alone, that she had people who loved her and believed in her, no matter what mistakes she had made in the past. And as she looked to the future, Ada knew that she had to find a way to forgive herself, to let go of the guilt and remorse that threatened to consume her from within. She had made mistakes, yes, but she was determined to learn from them and to build a new life for herself, one filled with hope and possibility, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As the truth of Pastor Obinna's affair with Ada came to light, the church elders were filled with righteous indignation and fury. They saw his actions as a betrayal of the trust that had been placed in him as a shepherd of the flock, a violation of the sacred vows he had taken to uphold the values and principles of their faith. In an emergency meeting held behind closed doors, the elders deliberated over what action to take against Pastor Obinna. They couldn't let his indiscretions go unpunished, couldn't allow him to continue leading their congregation when his own moral character had been called into question. After much debate and soul-searching, the elders came to a unanimous decision. Pastor Obinna would be fired from his position as pastor of the church. It was a harsh but necessary step, they reasoned, a way to uphold the integrity of their faith and protect the sanctity of their congregation from further harm. When Pastor Obinna received word of the elders' decision, he was devastated. He had dedicated his life to serving the church, to spreading the word of God and ministering to the spiritual needs of his congregation. To be cast out in disgrace was a blow that struck him to his very core, leaving him reeling with shock and disbelief. He couldn't understand how things had gone so horribly wrong, how he had allowed himself to be drawn into a forbidden affair that had cost him everything he held dear. He felt a profound sense of shame and remorse, knowing that he had let down not only himself but also the members of his congregation who had placed their trust in him. But even as he grappled with the consequences of his actions, Pastor Obinna knew that he had to accept responsibility for what he had done. He had made a terrible mistake, and now he would have to face the consequences of his actions, whatever they may be. As news of Pastor Obinna's firing spread throughout the church community, the congregation was thrown into turmoil. Many of them were shocked and saddened by the sudden turn of events, unable to reconcile the image of the beloved pastor they had known with the scandalous rumors that now surrounded him. Some members of the congregation stood by Pastor Obinna, refusing to believe that he could be capable of such betrayal. They saw him as a victim of circumstance, a man who had been led astray by the temptations of the flesh and the frailties of human nature. But others were not so forgiving, viewing Pastor Obinna's actions as a stain on the reputation of their church and a betrayal of the trust that had been placed in him as their spiritual leader. They demanded justice for his indiscretions, calling for his removal from the pulpit and the restoration of their faith in the sanctity of their congregation.